Customs, apart from revenue augmentation, trade facilitation, and safeguarding the economic frontiers of the country, also stands committed for combating the illegal wildlife trade and cross-border wildlife trafficking. Now it's time to welcome our distinguished Chief Guest of Honor today, Ms. V. Rama Matthew, Member CBIC. Ms. V. Rama Matthew is an officer of 1988 batch. Before becoming Member and Special Secretary to the Government of India, CBIC, she was holding the substantive charge of Principal Chief Commissioner, Kolkata Zone, and additional charge of Guwahati Zone. She has also served in Customs, DRI, DGGI, and GST in various capacities. Her yeoman service for ensuring smooth clearance of critical medical supplies and trade facilitation as Commissioner, Mumbai Zone, was widely appreciated during lockdown. Ma'am, it's a pleasure to have with us. With immense pleasure, I now kindly request Ms. V. Rama Matthew, Member CBIC, to share her words of wisdom with us on this momentous occasion.
About the words, I'm also sure about the wisdom. Respected Sri Dr. Rangarajan, my former chairman, Mr. Ajit Kumar Subaya, esteemed retired officers, a lot of whom have mentored me through this process of growing up, my colleagues, partner agencies, officers of Chennai Customs, and other distinguished guests. So much is being said today about what customs is all about, that I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to be talking about at the moment. Customs is a force multiplier, not just in protecting flora and fauna, generally as a force multiplier. I think I will go there. I will limit my contribution to the subject of flora and fauna to a very simple thing. I leave you with that very simple thought. I don't know whether you know the story of rabbits in Australia, eucalyptus in the Western Ghats, or catfish in the backwaters. We keep talking about rare species, endangered species. I'll talk to you about endangered environment. What happens when, without thought, not necessarily even smuggling, with all great goodwill, we introduce a foreign species to the local environment. In Australia, when rabbits were first introduced, it was seen as vast grasslands, a good way to feed people. Very interesting thoughts. Now you pay people to shoot rabbits because they're such pests, because there were no natural predators. The same thing happened to catfish in the backwaters. The natural predators didn't exist, so they actually took over native species. And what eucalyptus has done to the Western Ghats water tables is now the stuff of legend. We think of eucalyptus as beautiful trees, very fragrant trees. We actually sniff it when we drive through. But what they have done to the local water table, only an environmentalist will be able to tell you. So when we do something in all goodwill, we need to think, I think, about 5 steps ahead of what we are doing. A vision of what could possibly happen. I mean, being conservative is bad vibes, but conservative in thought process is, to my mind, thinking about why something is the way it is before we choose to change it. I'm not a great believer that in the philosophy that the person before me didn't know what he was talking about, the person after me may or may not understand what I am doing. Everyone has his place in the larger schema. We are, all of us, just playing one role in a continuous process. And the day we realize that, is the day we stop talking about our contribution and we talk about my contribution, we start talking about our contribution. Customs as a force multiplier has been an amazing thing. A lot of the people sitting here have contributed in a major way to its becoming that. We have, I would say, over the last 75 years, odd years, not just the 60 years of the Customs Act, but all the last 75 years, done quantum jumps in what we have, how we have processed. Mr. Ajit Kumar was talking about not clearing in 24 hours. And when a physical bill of entry was a document in multiple colors, I don't even remember the colors except the blue and the yellow and the white. I think there was a pink also. A lot of the officers here would not even have seen these things. And when we joined service, we were taught about the trail of the bill of entry, how it went, what it did, and what each color signified. And by the time I came to working in customs, that piece of paper did not exist. Not in the physical form anyway. In my lifetime in the service, that's in the last 30 odd years, I have seen 6 major shifts, quantum shifts. And I would say that before that there were probably 3 or 4 more, because it took longer in the earlier days to make that quantum jump. These days the quantum jumps happen in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. The last one was under Ajit Sir's leadership when you talk about the faceless assessment and the Turant customs and paperless working. It's been an amazing journey. I think probably in my lifetime, I don't know how long I live, that is in the hands of somebody else. But in my lifetime, I would probably see at least 2 or 3 more such leaps. What I would hope and look for is not to make that leap blindly, but make that leap consciously with full awareness of what we are doing and where we are going and how we are planning to get there. We have seen in this particular movie, short film which Subhaya has put out, exactly what Chennai has been doing in the cause of wildlife, flora and fauna, conservation, what customs can do. I would say that Chennai Customs has been a leader in this field. You have seen Calcutta probably in a minor way catching up, but Chennai has led, been at the forefront of all seizures, I think, over the last few decades. I don't know whether it is because Chennai has been the center of smuggling of wildlife flora, wildlife and flora, or it is because there is so much more awareness in Chennai about this kind of smuggling. I had served in Calcutta before. Calcutta is a very interesting place, I must tell you. The entire Northeast contributes amazingly to the kind of variety of sheer produce which can actually be smuggled in this particular area. And it also is closest to the markets physically and geographically, both as transit and as user countries. But strangely, the larger seizures of some of those commodities happen here. It is interesting and raises cause for thought. The seizures in the Northeast have been a very large scale also. Where they have been caught, the quantum has been huge. We don't believe in small, by the way, in Indian customs. We always believe in large. The larger, the better. The bigger the quantity, the better. Whether it's revenue, whether it's import or export, whether it is a seizure, whether it is finding something to do, whether it's a contribution. We don't believe in small scale, we believe in large scale. So my challenge to you would be, how big can we be going forward and what can we do for this country? I'm actually not going into a lot of what I wish to say because my previous two speakers have said a lot of what I wanted to say. And I will not bore you out of your minds saying the same things. And they've said it so much better than I could have. So I wish you all the best. It's a beautiful function. Thank you, and
Thank you very much, ma'am, for making that passionate appeal for each one of us to contribute to save our planet. Dr. C. Rangarajan is a leading economist of India who has played a key role both in academic as well as in policy making. He has held several important positions which include Governor of Reserve Bank of India and Governor of Andhra Pradesh. Dr. C. Rangarajan obtained his honours degree from Madras and PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He was till May 2014 Chairman, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister in the rank of Cabinet Minister, a position he has held since January 2005, except during 2008-09 when he was the Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. During 2003 and 4, he was the Chairman of the 12th Finance Commission. Dr. C. Rangarajan was Governor of the RBI during 1992 to 97, at a time when India embarked on wide-ranging economic reforms which fundamentally altered the structure of the Indian economy. The path-breaking reforms that he implemented during this period include deregulation of interest rates, strengthening of the banking system by a gradual tightening of prudential norms, creation and nurturing of financial markets and giving them depth and vibrancy. India became a member of the Bank for International Settlements during his time as governor. In recognition of his distinguished service to the country, the government honored him with Padma Vibhushan in 2002, the second highest civilian honor. He was the recipient of Professor P.C. Mahalanobis National Award in Official Statistics in Lifetime Achievement Category 2020. He was awarded the first Dr. C.R. Rao Centenary Gold Medal for Lifetime Achievement by the Indian Econometry Society in 2021. Sir, it is indeed our privilege and honor to have your esteemed presence amongst us today. We'd now like to invite you to deliver the keynote address.
Coming in the way, no? It's all right. Ms. Rama Matthews, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Mr. Chaudhary, members of the Customs Department, and distinguished invitees. I am happy to be with you all this morning as you celebrate the 60th completion of the 60 years of the Indian Customs Act, which is a consolidation of the several previous enactments. Customs did constitute a major source of revenue prior to the reforms of 1991. Just before the reforms were introduced in 1990, that the customs revenue constituted 36% of the total revenue of the central government. When a department is created, there are always several reasons for setting up that department. Even in a revenue earning department, the reasons can be multiple. Of course, raising revenue is the first priority of any revenue raising department. But then there are other objectives. In fact, the very purpose of imposing import duty or customs duty is really to fulfill several objectives, to which I shall come a little later. But this morning, we also heard about objectives which go beyond economic issues alone, like protecting the flora and fauna of the country. In some sense, it is an indirect function of the Customs Department, just as the customs duty, about which I shall talk a little more later, came as a consequence of achieving an objective like protecting the industry at home. The protection of fauna and flora also comes into play because of the international implications of that particular objective. Protecting the fauna and flora within the country as such is the responsibility of somebody else. It is essentially the international implications of that which brings into play the role of the Customs Department. Therefore, when you judge the performance and efficiency of a particular department, one needs to bear in mind the objectives with which that department was set up. So when you judge the efficiency of the Customs Department, you not only look at the revenue earnings of the that have been put before it. Of course, any department of the government must also be judged by the pure efficiency with which the department is functioning. That essentially means how well the officers and the members of the department complete the job, how effectively they perform that particular function. But therefore, in the context of even a revenue earning department, their customer relationship is also critically important. All of us have traveled abroad, and many and almost all of us coming from abroad land in India past midnight. because this is to facilitate the people, the time at which people get into the aircraft at the other end. And therefore we all end up tired, fatigued, without sleep, and land here at about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, or 12 o'clock in the midnight. At that time, when you have to go through the formalities of the customs, I think the members of the department have also to be kindly to the people. One can ask the question, how can a revenue earning department, which is charged with the responsibility of preventing smuggling, preventing many other illegal activities, be so kindly? But I do believe that the members of the department can be firm and at the same time be courteous. I think we need to join these two seemingly opposite characteristics of being courteous and being firm. That, I think, is something that the department will have to practice. And in fact, many of the changes that have happened with respect to the policy will also help you. And I'm going to presently go into that issue of what is the change in policy regarding the customs duty in this country, and what important changes were brought about by the reforms introduced in 1990 and 1991. The origin of the customs department everywhere is to protect the domestic industry and prevent the flow of goods from abroad in a way in which it is harmful or injurious to the domestic industries. Then there are two options open. One is really to say, if that commodity is harming our domestic industry, why not ban it? The other way of dealing with it is impose a high tariff. This is what we call in economics, one takes what is called the command and control method, and the other takes to the pricing or the market mechanism. Banning can be done. It was done with respect to gold for a long time in this country, and it did not prevent gold coming into the country. The Customs Department may take pride about the amount of smuggled gold that they might have gathered, but then statisticians have also estimated that if X is the amount of gold smuggled through which has been caught, then what should have been the total amount of gold that is smuggled into the country. Therefore, banning has two disadvantages. One, you lose the revenue. Second, you actually spend in order to prevent the commodity coming into the country. But tariffs again have their own implications. Economists call it the infant industry argument, namely levying a high duty or tariff on imported goods to prevent the industry from growing within the country. But then, without a sunset clause, this doesn't exactly result in the Indian infant industry becoming strong enough to get away from a high level of duty later on. As somebody said, infants only grow strong enough to cry louder for protection. That is all they do. They don't go into adults. So this is one of the basic reasons given for customs duty. But please remember, a very high level of tariff may look like somewhat preventing the commodity from coming in, but that can also result in smuggling because that becomes a great deterrent. Therefore, in fixing the tariff, we should really be very careful about the level at which we fix the tariff. It should not be at a level at which it drives away the commodity coming through the legal channels. In fact, we found it in post-1991 that the collection of income tax in this country increased after we reduced the income tax rate. Do you know that in 1980, beyond a particular level, the income tax, the rate of income taxation on that slab was close to 96%. That is, out of 1 rupee earned, 96 paise was to go to the government. Now, naturally, what happens? It leads to the black market, black money, and so on. Therefore, in fixing the level of the tariff, one has to be extremely careful. I will come back now to the fixing of the tariff before and after the reforms, and that gives you an idea of what amount of ingenuity should go in fixing the tax rates. But coming back, as I said, that in the British days, as one of my earlier speakers remarked, the custom duty was used in the perverse way. Instead of protecting the industry in India, they protected the industry in Britain. That is a textile industry. Is a typical example on which they removed the import tariff and levied an excise duty on the domestic textiles. But immediately after the independence, the high level of tariff imposed on imported goods came out of a particular philosophy. The strategy of development that we adopted after independence had 4 elements. One is a rise in the savings and investment rate. Investment is a driver of economic growth, and therefore the savings rate and the investment rate in the country should go up. Second element in the strategy was that the state has an important role to play, and that is what resulted in planning. And third is industrialization with an emphasis on heavy industry. And the fourth is import substitution. Import substitution essentially meant a strategy of industrial development in which India will produce goods domestically, whatever we are importing. I will not go into all the elements, but let me take only the last one, the import substitution. The import substitution essentially meant that the domestic industry must be able to produce the commodities that we are importing. Now, this looks like a very natural argument, but then the offshoot of this is that the imported goods must not be allowed. We must prevent the import, and that is why it was decided to have a high level of tariff. In 1990, before the reforms, the weighted average tax rate on imports of manufacturers in India was 86.84%. On the weighted average tariff rate on all commodities was 56.36%. This basically meant that the cost of producing the commodity in India became high. And this affected our exports also. I do not know whether you have seen these numbers. India's share of exports in world exports in 1950 was 2% of the world trade, world exports. By 1970, or the end of 1970, or even 1980, India's share in world exports was less than half of 1%. India became a high-cost economy. Our exports were affected. And please remember, even today, we have not gone back to 2% of the world exports. We are little short of 2% of the world exports now. Maybe we'll catch up in the next few years. Therefore, the policy of import substitution and the levy of high rate of taxation on imports led to a situation in which that even our exports got affected. Therefore, in 1990, we faced an acute economic crisis. This economic crisis was triggered by a severe balance of payments problem. Of course, the Iraq-Kuwait war led to a rise in the price of oil, and that aggravated the problem. But India's current account deficit in 1990 touched about 3% of GDP. Sometimes even it is expected that India's current account deficit this year will be 3% of GDP. But in dealing with the problem of balance of payments, there are twofold problems. One is the level of the current account deficit, and the other is how to finance that current account deficit. The problem in 1990 was not only that the current account deficit was high, but also it was difficult to finance it. We were not able to borrow from other people. And that is when we went to the extent of being able to send our gold outside. And I monitored it. I spent sleepless nights until that gold, 46 tons of gold, actually reached London. Of course, it went by chartered flight, and then some through the normal flights, and so on. But I'm saying this only to show that we landed up in a serious situation in 1990 because of the high level of current account deficit and our inability to finance that deficit. And that is the time at which we had to rethink about our own strategy of development. The 1991 policy, I am a little proud of the fact that I was part of the team which ushered in the reforms, that we made three important changes. One was to dismantle the vast network of permits and controls that dominated the system. Second, we reoriented the role of the state. We did not diminish the role of the state, as some people think. That is not correct. In some areas it expanded, in some areas it came down. But there is a reorientation of the role of the state. And thirdly, from our point of view this morning, is the move away from the import substitution policy and to embrace world trade. We did devaluation in order to correct the balance of payments, and that also, it was done in a very dramatic way. You may recall that we did the devaluation in two steps. And that time the devaluation was not done by the government. The government agreed and government decided, but the devaluation was done by the Reserve Bank of India. Because the Reserve Bank of India used to announce every day that in the morning at 9 o'clock we will say what the exchange rate of the rupee will be. And on that morning, on July 1, I just announced the rate of the exchange rate of the rupee will be X, which is a substantial decline in it. And people were shocked, and people did not know what it is. And then followed it up by 2 days later by another substantial reduction in the value of the rupee. I'm saying all of this to say that ultimately it is a balance of payment situation which is critical, and you are part of it in one sense. And the major policy decision at that particular time was not devaluation. We have done devaluation before. We did it in 1966 in a big way. That is not the main thing. The change in the policy that came as a consequence of the reforms is extremely important. We did away with large number of physical controls on imports, and we also did move towards reducing the tariff rates on a wide variety of commodities. I can tell you that as a consequence of all of this, in 2015, on manufactured goods, the rate of taxation tariff rate is 9%, the weighted average. And overall, it is 7.6, compared to what I told you earlier, 86% on manufacturers and 56% on overall. So we moved away from a high-level tariffs to low-level tariffs and be willing to compete in the world market. India's exports in, let's say, 1990 was 4.75% of GDP. Today, it is 11.1 of GDP. Imports are 8.24 earlier, and it is 14.98 now. The point that I wish to make, and with which I will conclude, is that the share of customs duties as a proportion of total revenue has come down substantially. But that is not a reflection on the department. That is the result of a policy change that we made in 1991. That we will move away from the policy of import substitution and we will integrate with the world trade. And that is the reason for doing it. Therefore, your responsibility will not come down as a consequence, because the imports today, as I mentioned to you, are so much higher than what the imports were in earlier, 8.24% earlier before the reforms and 14.98. So the base is expanding, but the rate is coming down. And that is the direction in which we have to move. One can ask the question, why should we do it? Why can't we have a protection all around? I think the most important thing is, I'm going to take a detour to the theory of international trade. Why should there be free and fair trade internationally? That is essentially because when trade is free, every commodity will be produced in that country in which the cost of production is the least. And in this, again, the theory of international trade talks about comparative advantage and absolute advantage. Take, for example, the trade of paper. The Western countries, European countries, import paper because they cannot produce paper in that country, because paper cannot grow there. So that is a kind of an absolute advantage. Only one country has the ability to produce, the other country has not the ability to produce that. But there are many other commodities in which several countries have the ability to produce the commodities. But each country will produce that commodity in which its comparative advantage is higher. One good example to give outside is the best lawyer in the town may also be the best stenographer. But he cannot, because he is the best stenographer, he will not go into doing the stenography work. His comparative advantage as a lawyer is greater than his comparative advantage in terms of being a stenographer. Therefore, each country will produce under a free and fair trade that commodity for which it is the best, it is the least cost of, it has the least cost of production in that commodity. And then we can show the welfare of the world as a whole will go up. But the infant industry argument is not without relevance. Take, for example, even steel. In 1947 or 1950, we did not produce steel except for the Tatars in a big way. But given the time, we showed that we are in a position to be able to produce steel as well. Therefore, the infant industry argument with a sunset clause is always has meaning. My advice to the government always has been, any levy of customs duty must have a sunset clause. Otherwise, what will happen is that we'll continue to produce that commodity domestically without reference to the cost of production. The world is changing. In 2000, in that decade, globalization was going at a rapid pace. Before the crisis of 2008-9, the world trade expanded at the fastest pace. And as a result, the globalization spread. But there is some rethink now. Even those who talked greatly and advised all the developing countries to be part of the free trade are taking some steps backwards. The United States is a good example, at least under the time of Trump administration, that all the member countries are not playing the game properly, and therefore we will have to impose restrictions on imports. Of course, the current account deficit of United States is unimaginable. It is very high. But that is because they have lost their efficiency. But then they say that others are not playing the rules of the game. Yes, some people are, or were not playing the rules of the game in the right spirit. China is one good example of that. But the point is that they are now wanting to go back at a time when the developing countries have reached the stage in which they can compete in the world. So that is a wrong direction in which they are moving. We should really now urge the people, all the countries, to essentially move in the direction of a free trade. Actually, there was a reference to the trade blocs that are being formed. In fact, trade blocs are an antithesis of free trade. But when the free trade is getting curtailed, this creation of the blocs has become the second best, as we call it, the second best formulation. Therefore, we really need to strengthen our economy in such a way that we are able to compete in the world. The Russian-Ukraine war has posed another problem. That is extreme dependence in terms of import of a commodity which is vital on one country or one group of countries is also a problem. When, for example, there is an outbreak of hostilities. Many countries have seen that problem, faced that problem recently. Therefore, and then the other thing is, when any country is extremely dependent upon one vital commodity on outside world, it can also become a problem when there are hostilities. Oil is a good example. But sometimes there is no other alternative. Take, for example, India. India today imports 80% of its fuel requirements, oil requirements, from outside. Maybe extreme dependence on one country may be avoided, but dependence on oil cannot be eliminated until we are able to find out alternative sources of energy, non-conventional sources of energy. That is not immediately available in the horizon. Therefore, in some sense, we have to live in a world in which hostilities are not the normal feature. We have international trade can happen only in a system or only in an environment in which there are no hostilities. Hostilities cannot become a normal feature. Therefore, as we go by, we really need to modify our international trading system to take care of these problems. Extreme dependence on a single commodity, extreme dependence on one nation or one group of nations for certain commodities, it needs to be avoided. But at the same time, we should move in the direction of free trade. Atmanirbhar should not degenerate into becoming the old import substitution. That is a wrong direction in which to go. In recent period, we have been raising the duties. As I said, sometimes there may be need for raising the duties, but whenever whenever duties are raised, as I said earlier, we must have a sunset clause. Therefore, as we move along, international trade is important. All our talk about $5 trillion or becoming a developed country by 2047, that is 25 years from now, is well taken. We have estimated, I have an article in which I have estimated the required rate of growth of the economy in order to become a developed country by 2047. It means a real rate of growth of 8 to 9% between now and 2047. For two decades and a half, we need to grow at 8 to 9%. Then only we will reach the status of a developed country, which means that the per capita income of the country should be $13,000. Today we are at $1,900. So that is the requirement if we have to achieve that. But as part of that, we also need to promote international trade and exports. Somebody mentioned the word export-led growth. Export-led growth may not be the most appropriate thing for a big country like India. Export-led growth certainly gave results for South Korea, certainly gave results for Taiwan, and so on. But we are a big country. But international trade is still an important part of it. Therefore, as you move along, you have many responsibilities. Some of the earlier speakers spelled out what those responsibilities are. But despite some murmurs now, I believe that the international trade will continue to grow. And while, as we move along, the import duty will come down, but the base of imports will widen, and therefore you will continue to play an important role as far as the economy is concerned. Let me wish you all the very best, and let me also wish you, even though it is somewhat 2 weeks ahead, a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your words of wisdom. We do not have any doubt that your discussion on Indian economy, free trade, world economy, implication of tariffs, and reorientation of role of state post-BOP crisis would have enriched the knowledge of this August gathering. Thank you, sir, for also highlighting the efforts taken by Indian customs in protecting the flora and fauna, which also has international implications. We assure you that we shall continue to strengthen our efforts to protect our flora and fauna, in addition to our revenue augmentation role and guarding the economic frontiers of our country. Moving ahead, it is time for distribution of mementos. I kindly request our CC sir to present a memento on behalf of Chennai Customs to the dignitaries on the dais as a token of our love and gratitude. First, our CC sir will present a memento to our chief guest, Dr. C. Rangarajan. Next, our Chief Commissioner, sir, will present a memento to CBIC member, Ms. Rama Mathew, madam. Next, our Chief Commissioner, sir, will present a memento to former Chairman CBIC, Sri Ajit Kumar, sir. Now may I kindly request Sri Srinivas Nayak, Principal Commissioner, to present a memento to Sri M.S. Chaudhary, Chief Commissioner, Chennai Customs Zones.
Thank you, sir. As we come to the close of this event, I would like to invite Sri Raj Shekhar, Additional Commissioner, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Respected Chief Guest of the Day, Sri Rangarajan sir, Guest of Honor, Srimati V. Rama Mathew, Member CBIC, special invitee, Sri M. Ajit Kumar, former Chairman, CBIC, the Chief Commissioner of Customs, Chennai Customs Zone, Sri M.B.S. Chaudhary, other distinguished guests, and my dear colleagues and friends. It is time to express our gratitude to all who have made this event a memorable one. To quote William Arthur Ward, feeling honored and not expressing it is like wrapping a present and not giving it. So, I feel honored and privileged to get this opportunity to propose vote of thanks on behalf of Chennai Customs on this special occasion. I would like to begin by thanking our chief guest, Padma Vibhushan, Sri Rangarajan sir, who has spared his precious time for us and graced this occasion with his presence. We all are fortunate to have his esteemed presence in this event. Sir, your speech was thought-provoking and we are enriched by your words of wisdom. Sir, with reference to your suggestion, sir, we assure you that while we are firm with the offenders, we will be definitely courteous, rather more than that with the genuine trade and genuine passengers. Thank you very much, sir. We are deeply inspired and honored by your presence. We all know that this event is part of the nationwide celebration of 60th anniversary of Customs Act 1962, and it is indeed fitting that member CBIC, Srimati Rama Matthew ma'am, has joined our celebration and graced the occasion as our guest of honor. Thank you very much, ma'am, for being with us today and for sharing your experiences and valuable thoughts with all of us. Madam, with reference to your observation, I can say that we in Chennai Customs are well aware of these things, ma'am, regarding number of seizures of this wildlife and other products. These